Welcome to Guitar Gavel, a place for people who love guitars. These are conversations with musicians, guitar enthusiasts, techs, and collectors about their guitar journey and their love of the instrument. Thanks for tuning in. Please hit the subscribe button, share with your friends, and be sure to sign up for our twice weekly newsletter at guitargavel.com. Welcome to the Guitar Gavel podcast. I'm David Still. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. Listen, really, thank you for your time. It's our number one asset, number one commodity. And for you to spend your time, 45 minutes to an hour listening, watching this podcast means everything. So thank you so much for that. Also, if you like what you hear or what you are watching, if you would please leave some positive feedback in the comment section or give a nice 5-star rating to the podcast. Would really appreciate that. So here we are. Podcast number such and such, almost a lost count, which is great. And I'm here with Rob Bernstein, a friend of mine, another digital friend of mine, virtual friend, but we're now in person from LinkedIn. And I'm pleased to have Rob. He's got some great stories. He's got some killer guitars, and I am looking forward to hearing to what he has to say and what we are going to see. In our case, it is evening. Wherever you are, whatever time you're watching it, you're in for a real treat. So, Rob, thanks so much for being a guest on the show. Really appreciate your time as well.
Thanks for having me on, David. Anytime I can geek out on guitars, I'm a happy guy.
Sweet. Good. We're in good company tonight then. So, and I feel like I say this so far, like every podcast. Here's the lead in. Big question. Rob, when did you start playing? Tell us about your introduction to the guitar and how everything got started for you.
Sure. So I was, I think, around 10 years old. What I do remember is I had some no-name classical guitar, so nylon strings. And I remember that I got it because my mother, when she'd go grocery shopping, they used to give out these S&H Green Stamps. Now, you may be too young to remember S&H Green Stamps, but you would get them at gas stations and grocery stores, and they were little stamps. They looked like, they were green, and they said S&H on them, and you'd, lick them or get the back wet, and you'd put them in a book. And then you'd have a place you could go to redeem the books for whatever you wanted. I wanted a guitar. So I got an S&H Green Stamps classical guitar, which was a sad excuse for a guitar, but you're 10 years old. Your parents don't want to spend a bunch of money on a guitar for you. So I looked a lot of stamps to get that thing. And then I realized, classical guitar, it's not really what I want to do. I need something with steel strings. So I don't remember how I got it, but it was a Harmony. A dreadnought, and the action on it was ridiculous, as they usually are when people are starting out.
Yes.
And I think that's probably the one thing that really discourages people from playing when they first start. It's like, it's killing my fingers and it hurts, so I'm just not going to do it. So parents out there, buy your kids a good guitar.
That's right.
To get started. So I took some lessons. I took group lessons, and less than a year, and got to the point where we're doing things like this land is your land, and I was just not into it. So at this point I was probably 12, so that's 1973. I was more into Cat Stevens, America. Crosby, Stills, Nash, that sort of thing. That's what I wanted to play. So I stopped the lessons. I was like, all right, this is not going where I wanted it to go. So I just started, picking stuff off of records because, of course, we didn't have YouTube and Amazing Slowdowner and things like that. So, I would just try and learn the stuff that I heard on the radio or on records, and that was the beginning of my journey, if you will. So
would you say listening and trying to play back what you're hearing from a record is maybe the easiest of all musical mediums to learn to play from? So think from there, I mean, I guess it's 8-track and then cassette. So when I'm coming along, it's a cassette. And if I'm listening, you got to stop, rewind. I guess if you've got like a good counter on it, you can reset it and that helps, but that wasn't on every jam box that I had. It slowed things down. I didn't learn trying to, from a record, but it's just a thought since you brought that up. Any thoughts there if it's easier? Cause you could just move the needle. I guess you could kind of gauge where you started.
Well, and that's the problem is it's very inexact, right?
Yeah.
At least with a cassette, you could go, all right, I need to go back to tape counter 99 or whatever. On a record, you just have to look at it, right, and sort of guess where to drop the needle down. And I remember reading an interview with Duane Allman. He would have his old blues records on, and he would use his toe to slow the record down while he was learning stuff. I never did that, but it was very inexact, but you sort of get it in your head, and that's really how I learned. I don't read music. I can read a chord chart, but it's all really by ear, and I think it was because that's what we had to do back then.
So you've got the harmony, and I'll insert one comment or pose one question, but we're on the same page. My first guitar had really high action, and it was an acoustic, and I eventually had it lowered because it was so difficult to play. And it was discouraging. I mean, it made me almost just put it up. I mean, it hurts too much, and all the things that you mentioned. But if you're really determined and you've got a super high action beater acoustic, there is a chance that actually makes you a better player in the scope of things.
Yep.
That wasn't the case. That wasn't my case, but I can see that is actually an asset or a driving force for someone who's thoroughly determined. But that young kid or that teenager is probably 1 in 100 or 1 in 1,000 that's just gonna to bear it out, because it sucks when it's terribly high action.
I've just heard from a lot of people who say, oh, you play guitar, I did for a month or whatever, and it was too difficult, and so I gave it up. So okay, but you're right. I mean, there's a reason why I stuck with it, and I think the light went off when I moved from that harmony with the action like that to my first electric, which we were talking about earlier, a 72 Telecaster. No comparison, right? No comparison there. But it does make you appreciate.
Tell us about the 72 Telly. You bought it used. Of course, this is in the era, so it's not vintage, but let's hear that story. Was it the one, or were you just like, I need an electric and this one fit the price range?
My brother worked at a music store, and I think I probably pestered him saying, I want to play electric, because he played. So, and I think at that point he had a Strat, and I think my parents probably said, well, here's the dollar limit, find him something. So, and I still have the receipt for it. So it was a 72 Telly. It was 1974 at that point. So it was a used guitar. There's no such thing as a vintage guitar, really. Paid $210 for it with a case. And that started me on my my way to where I'm at now. Wish I still had that one. But I have other Tellys now that kind of take its place. But it's interesting that I started, with basically the guitar that started the electric guitar revolution. At least I think so. There were other electrics before the Telly, but Leo, he did something right in 1948. Whenever the first broadcaster came out, and they're still selling Telecasters all these years later. That says something.
It does.
So I guess I've got a soft spot for Telecasters.
So, okay. Yeah. Look, when it's your first, I think there's always a soft spot, unless it's just something really, really terrible. You don't ever want to see it or play something similar to it again. But you came out of the gate pretty good. So that's your third guitar, your first electric, 72 Tele, which was a big year. It wasn't a thin line. We were talking offline earlier, but that was the first year of the thin line Tele. So kind of a great year for Fender coming out with that model. How long did that one last? Did you keep it in your possession for a while, or when was it like, okay, the Tele's great. What do I need to add to this?
Yeah, but keep in mind, at that point, I'm 13 or 14. Don't have a lot of disposable income, so you want a different guitar, you sell the guitar you have.
Yeah.
So that's how it went. I believe I traded in the Telecaster plus $100 or something to get that 77 Marauder, the Gibson Marauder that we were talking about.
Yeah.
Like I said, I really wanted a Les Paul, but I could not afford a Les Paul. So that was sort of the gateway into Les Pauldom, if you will. So I bought that new and played that for probably a year and a half. Not Gibson's finest hour, certainly. The bolt-on neck and just weird pickup arrangement. They were Bill Lawrence pickups, but just kind of a weird. They were sort of like in lucite. You could see through them for whatever reason. I thought that was cool. But I played that while I was kind of getting my electric chops together. And one of the questions you had asked was about inspiration. Who were you listening to? What was speaking to you at the time? So, that was like mid 70s. So there was all kinds of stuff going on with obviously, a little bit past the Beatles, but Zeppelin, Clapton, Jeff Beck, those were kind of the people that I gravitated to. But believe it or not, you talk to people that are older than I am, and they talk about, seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan in '64. Yeah. So I was 3 years old in '64. So I didn't know what the hell Beatles were. But for me, it was the Monkees. It was the Prefab Four. So we used to watch that show and, see Mike Nesmith playing his big Gretsch, 12 string or, the 6 string or whatever. And that kind of pushed me towards I want to do that. I want to make noise like that. So that was part of that journey. And then I decided, the Marauder, it's just not cutting it. I had a job at that point. It was, 16, 17. And I traded the Marauder in, and actually I sold the Marauder to somebody else, and I bought the 78 Les Paul Standard that's behind me with the money I made washing dishes. And some kids had paper routes. I washed dishes, and I can show that one if
grab it. Let's do it
if the timing is right.
Yes, so, it's always right. I'm going to go ahead and.
So this is a 78 that I bought in February of '79, and still in decent condition. And as I was pointing out to you, David, earlier, we did stupid things to guitars because they were just guitars. I put a small switch here to put the pickups out of phase, so it would sound like I don't know what, Peter Green. I'm not sure what the idea was, but anyway, that was on there for a long time. And actually, the guitar had a TP6 tailpiece. I don't know if you remember those. They had the fine tuners on them. This is when Norland was doing that when they owned Gibson. So a few years ago, I was like, you know what? I really want this guitar to be back to as close to as it was when I bought it. So I sent it to Gibson, to their repair center, and they filled that spot in and they resprayed some of it, and they did an unbelievable job. You can see a little dimple there, actually, if you hold it up in the light. And
Barely, yeah, but barely.
it
That's
barely. And
yeah.
I put Schaller tuners on there, I don't know, like the week after I bought the guitar, and those have been on there since then. But original frets, still plays great. Replaced the pickups a long time ago. They were DiMarzios. I mean, back then there really weren't a lot of choices, right? You know, Duncan's weren't around. It was DiMarzio was the first one to really offer aftermarket pickups. So I had DiMarzio's in here for years, but right now there's Duncan, I think PAFs. Anyway, so still have this guitar, 9 pounds, 7 ounces. Cost me $564 with a case. And I don't play it anymore, but I don't know. There's history there. So
when you got the Les Paul, because that's what you were lusting after, was it in that moment? Did it live up to your expectation? Was it everything you
I
were
think
hoping
so.
it was going to be? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think I became a better player. I mean, just from feeling like, yeah, this thing is real. This is a real guitar. You know, people play these. You know, my heroes play these. And at that point, I had graduated to that a real tube amp, to my Sun Scepter amp with 212s in it. And I had, made a little pedal board. And again, there weren't a lot of choices for pedals back then. I look now at how many pedals are out there, and it blows my mind. Yeah. Back then, it was like, okay, Maestro, which was owned by Gibson, Morley had pedals, and MXR was kind of the big thing. So I had made this little pedal board with my MXR Distortion Plus and a compressor, and I think at one point a flanger, and probably a Vox wah, and that's kind of what it was back then. Didn't have a lot of the choices, but yeah. So that I think at that point was when I started playing with other people, and that took me in another direction in terms of learning from people and learning about how to play with other people in time. I started singing because no one else would sing. I was like, sure, I'll sing. Why not? I mean, I didn't know if I could sing or not, but apparently I sang well enough to fake it through.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, I think that sort of pushed me in another direction, and had, fun playing in high school, and played all through high school, and then into college as well. Was in a band, and it was really what kind of kept me going through, good times, bad times. Music does that for people, but
that's right. Yes.
Your guitar's never going to talk back to you, or tell you you're having a bad hair day or something. So
I want to go back 1 second to your interest in the Monkees, at least for whether that's been lifelong or if that was just for a few years. But so when I was a kid, the Monkees reruns were on maybe Nickelodeon. I don't recall what channel that I was watching. But I loved the Monkees television show. And it was years later. I was in high school before I heard the story. Jimi Hendrix went on tour with the Monkees as an opening act. Do you recall this bit of Jimi Hendrix / Monkees?
Yes,
folklore?
I remember. Yeah. Well, much later, than when I was watching the show, but I remember reading that it did not last very long. That the crowds did not like Jimi Hendrix, the Monkees crowds, because he was
Yes.
opening up for the Monkees.
Right. They did not. So in the first story I heard growing up in Charlotte, North Carolina, was that the Monkees played at what we called, or Charlotteans called, the old Coliseum, which is really the old Coliseum at this point in time. But Hendrix opened up and they booed him. They booed him off, like literally booed him off. And of course, with the Monkees reunion tour here, their farewell tour this past year, there was a lot written about that, and it was right. Mickey and Michael that were left, correct me, yeah, because they talked about, man, this guy was next level. We knew he shouldn't have been opening up for us. He didn't fit the audience, but he was also in a different galaxy musically than where we were as the Monkees. So they said they would, from some of the snippets I read, just kind of sit on the side of the stage, man, just with their jaw hanging open, watching this. Meanwhile, all the teenage girls and 12-year-old boys are just booing Jimi Hendrix off the stage.
Probably scared the hell out of them.
Yes. So at any rate, I just find that fascinating. I wanted to visit that with you since you're a Monkees fan. So from the Les Paul, what was next?
Then it was at a point in my life where I didn't have to sell one guitar to get another guitar.
Yeah.
So the acquisition, I guess, began at that point. And I bought a Strat, and for some reason put a humbucker in the back. I don't know why. That was not a great move, but again, we do things like that, or we did things like that. I wouldn't do it now. So I had the Strat because I think that's what I was trying to get with that, the switch, the coil tap, and all that on the Les Paul. It's like, and I tell people, you want a single coil sound, play a single coil guitar. It's although I have to say some of the guitars I have, some of the PRSs, I'm a big PRS fan, have, coil taps on them, and they actually sound really good. It's not like playing a Strat or something, but they approximate it pretty well. So had the Strat for a while, and then kind of went through. I had a Flying V, and trying to think what else was. But the Les Paul that was my main guitar.
Yeah.
And I at one point I had a Dean when Dean was just starting to make a name for themselves.
What do you have?
I don't have it anymore, but it was called a Baby Z. It looked like an Explorer, but a smaller body. And it had a Kahler trem on it because that was the days of, you had to have a trem on your guitar, or you just, you weren't anybody. It was a very cool looking guitar. I will say that, but that one didn't last. And I was kind of thinking, as I was looking through some of the questions that we might talk about, I've always liked the quote unquote, the modern guitars of Gibson, the Firebirds, Explorers, Flying V, and I've owned one of just about all of them. And for some reason, just never really bonded with them because the bodies never felt comfortable to me. I'm not a large person. And I had a beautiful 335, but just was not comfortable to play. I've tried a lot of them, and I just sort of gravitate to things that are a little smaller bodied. I have an ES 339, which is basically a scaled down 335, about the size of a Les Paul. Very comfortable. Very cool guitar. Those are kind of neat. I've tried Gretches, never really bonded with Gretches, and I have a Rick. I don't have it up, but I have a Rick 360.
Okay.
So that whole 60s type vibe thing. I had a 12 string for a while, and the necks were just so narrow on those. They were just not comfortable for me to play, especially a 12 string. You're cramming 12 strings into something that's barely right for 6 strings. I don't know how Roger
Yeah.
McGuinn does it.
Yeah.
Bless him, he does it. But that was just, I sold that. That just was not, and that's kind of my whole thought process with these guitars. If I'm not going to play them,
Yeah.
Why would I have them? So I sell them. I get other ones, and it's probably, I don't know, 15 years ago. I found a guy on Craigslist who did guitar repair. And I don't know what I needed. I was always a little nervous about repairing guitars. Like, I can change the strings.
Yeah.
But like truss rod, oh, my God, don't touch the truss rod. You'll break the neck. So brought a guitar to this guy. His name is Kurt Florzak. He lives here in the Boston area. And had him set up a guitar and did a great job. So I started bringing him other guitars, and I started asking him questions like, okay, so, should I really be afraid to turn a truss rod, tweak a truss? He's like, no, you don't. Let me show you. So, I'm sure I annoyed the hell out of him with questions, but he took the time to say, show me, here's what you're trying to do, showed me basically how to check what the relief is in the neck. And he's like, just, move it a little bit. It's not like you're cranking, lug nuts or anything. So he sort of helped me get a little more comfortable with working on my own guitars. And now I love it. I mean, thank God there's places like StewMac where I buy tools from.
Yes.
It's not, I'm not a shill for StewMac. I'm just saying that, there's all kinds of cool stuff, and the videos you can watch.
Yeah, their videos are great. I mean, it's fun. Yeah, it's a lot of fun to hang out with StewMac.
Yep. I think Dan Erlewine is he's a god. But I do love watching their stuff, and then I'm not afraid to try things. And you know what? If I do something that I probably shouldn't have done, I bring it to Kurt, and he fixes it, and he doesn't yell at me. But we become very good friends in the ensuing years. So the whole point of me kind of leading in with that story was he's a vintage guitar guy. So he has, I think, a 59 Les Paul Junior and a TV Special. I was like, let me take a look at those. So started playing them. It's like, wow, this cool vibe with these P90s. I never had played P90s before. So thought that was kind of cool. So, and this was probably, again, 10 years ago before guitar prices went cuckoo. I said, maybe I'll look for something, so, on eBay for a few months, and I found something, that was relatively affordable, looked like it was in good condition, and picked up. This is a 59 Les Paul Jr. In good shape for how old it is. Kind of interestingly, it's got a black pick guard, which usually they're tortoise.
Okay.
But I think there was probably leftover black pick guards from something, so they stuck one of those on. And as we were talking earlier, I don't really know a lot about the guitar. I bought it out of a place in St. Louis, but I'm sure somebody spent a lot of years on it. It's in very nice condition. The original tuners, everything's original on it. The only thing I did change is I put a Mojo Axe tailpiece on it, so to help with the intonation, because there really wasn't any adjustment other than moving the tailpiece back and forth. But there's something about these old P90s, that they just sound unbelievable. And what I've learned is, playing with the volume knob makes a huge difference. You know, with the Les Paul, I'm like, all right, crank it up, you know, through the Marshall that I had that I don't have anymore. Because that's kind of, you know, late 70s, 80s, that's the music I was playing.
Yeah.
And that's how you got that sound. But, you know, you play with the volume control on these P90s and it cleans up, you know, when you bring it down. And then, you know, you go a little part way up, you start to get a little gritty, and then you go all the way up and, you know, you're in distortion mode. But so this was my first kind of vintage guitar, thanks to my guitar tech, Kurt. Have him to thank for that. But, you know, for student guitars, because, you know, these were student guitars.
Yeah.
Inexpensive. And it came with the original chipboard case, which is kind of falling apart. But so that started me on that path, if you will.
So your wife owes a big thank you to Kirk. That's what I'm hearing here.
or not.
Not.
But you know, it's funny because, you know, people will say, you know, buying guitars, is that a good investment? It's like, if that's what you're buying a guitar for, probably not. You know, I see it as you buy the guitar, you enjoy the guitar, you play the guitar. If it increases in value, awesome. If it doesn't, so what? You know,
That's right.
You enjoy playing it. Well, that's, you know, that's what matters. So,
and even if it's flat or goes down, if you got X amount of years of enjoyment from it and you sell it, let's say you purchase a guitar new for $1,000, you play it for 10 years and you sell it for $700 or $500. Did you get $300 to $500 of enjoyment out of it? Of course you
right.
did. Like,
right.
You got tens of thousands of dollars worth of enjoyment. If we are trying to equate your enjoyment level to dollars and cents, yeah, just be happy. Go get another.
Yep.
You know.
Exactly. I mean, I know there's people that buy the instruments, you know, 59 Les Pauls and things like that as an investment, but that's not. First of all, I can't afford a 59 Les Paul unless it's a junior, but it's not the reason I would buy them. So. Yeah. So that kind of started me on that. While we're kind of going down that path, I came across a good opportunity. I wasn't looking for it, but it popped up and the price was right. So I talked to my buddy Kurt and I was like, you know, what do you think of this? And he actually has a very similar guitar. This is a 1963 Epiphone Coronet. Basically Epiphone's version of the Junior, right? Single P90. But this thing weighs like 5 pounds. It weighs nothing. And this was right before they went to the Batwing headstock. So I'm sure you've seen those, you know, 6 on the side. This was kind of the last of the 3 on the side tuners that they did. And this guitar has original tune. Everything's original on it, except, again, I put a Mojo Axe bridge on it so I could intonate it. But, you know, you see a lot of these with shrunken pick guards. You know, they crack because they're shrinking. And the E logo is usually missing. This one's in really good condition. And again, the P90 there's just something magical about a single P90. You know, this was like Steve Marriott played these in Humble Pie, and really, really nice guitar. But, you know, again, it was a low-end student guitar, but built in Kalamazoo.
And that was, you said that was a 69?
Excuse me?
Did you say that was a 69?
No, this is a 63.
63. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. Because I was thinking 69. I think 69 was the last year they made those in Kalamazoo.
Probably. Yeah. And they look different. The offset was different on the horns. Right. And then the headstock was different as well back then. But anyway, so that was kind of my introduction gateway, if you will, to vintage guitars that I can afford. And
well, those are two great ones right there. What is right over your shoulder? And I don't want to steal your thunder, but I'm very curious. Yes.
So, if you're familiar with, there's I guess a boutique builder, you'd call him. His name is Don Grosh. He's in Colorado, and this is called an Electrojet.
Wow.
So kind of a, offset body, kind of cool shape. I think the thing with this guitar was the color. It looks a little different from what I'm seeing in there, but it's like, creamsicle orangey, metallic. And, he's got his pickups in it, 2 humbuckers, but, basically a 3-way switch with a push-pull for tapping the pickups. And I will say, I own, Anderson, I own a bunch of Prs, and I own a number of Grosches. And either Don or whoever does his fretwork, it's unbelievable how smooth the fretwork is. And that's one of the things you find with like cheaper guitars is a lot of times they have fret sprout and things like that. But his fretwork is immaculate and just, beautiful guitar, very well made. And they're very nice people. I think I had to replace the volume control on here. It started to go funky on me. So I called them, and I think his wife's name is Danny. And she just said, yeah, give me your address. I'll pop one in the mail to you. And she did. And, that's the kind of people that are building these guitars. So yeah, I mean, we're in like the golden age, if you will, of instruments. And, not to take away from, my PRSs or the Grosches or the Prs, but I've played some, $200 guitars made in Indonesia or China that are actually really good. I mean, some of those guitars are amazing. So, and we didn't have that, we meaning people of my generation, coming up. There were those crappy guitars with, the action like that.
Yeah.
And this is just, it's a very different world now. So
The Grosh that you have there, how long have you had it? And how did you come to discover Don's guitars?
that's a good question. I've owned that guitar probably for 10 years.
Okay.
And what I found is, when I discover like Sir, Anderson, Grosh, I start with one and I'm like, okay, that's really cool. I think I need another one, a little different. So one thing has led to the other. I think that I was at a music store here in Massachusetts, and I was looking at something. I don't remember what I was looking for, but I came across the Electrojet, and I didn't know who Don Grosh was. But I sat down and played that guitar, and like I said, the fretwork on it and the neck are just unbelievable, and I fell in love with it, and so that sort of started me down that road, if you will. So let me show you this one since it's here. It's a PRS. I've got a number of PRSs. This was built, I think, for Sweetwater, for the Sweetwater thing that they do every summer. This is a single piece maple top, which is kind of cool. So there's no seam on it. And this is a single cut. They don't really make it like this anymore with the pickup selector down here. And I've done things like, I'm not a huge fan of the plastic pickup surrounds. So these are maple on this one. I've done that, on a number of my guitars. But started with, a custom 22, and these are just very well-made guitars. And for a number of years, PRS did this thing called the Prs Experience. I don't know if you ever heard of it. They haven't done it in a couple of years. I think they started doing it again last year. So if you send in your box tops and whatever, you can join the club. And then in the end of the summer, October, they do this big PRS Love Fest down in Stevensville, where they are down by Annapolis. And so I went down there, I think 4 times. And they've got tents set up outside. You take factory tours. They've got people playing, constantly. They sell stuff. I didn't buy this guitar there, but saw a lot of great players. Howard Leese was there, guy from Heart, and David Grissom. If you don't know David Grissom, he's out of Austin. Fantastic player. Played with John Mellencamp for a while and Joe Ely. But it's just a good time. I mean, if you want to geek out on guitars, you're there for 3 days. And the people in the factory are really nice, really accommodating. I ask a zillion questions. They never got frustrated with me. You watch the CNC machines. You can get they have these like little workshops where they give you a piece of maple and you can stain it to see what the stains look like. Just very, and I got a picture of myself with Paul Reed Smith. Of course, that's, you have to do that. And he was very kind. He autographed a Vintage Guitar Magazine cover that I brought him. But, I think, PRS to me is sort of the modern day, what Gibson was in their heyday. I mean, Gibson's coming back, but, I really just love their guitars, and I think they do a great job, and with their lower end stuff as well, with the SEs and all that. I've played them, and they're great. They're fantastic. So you almost can't go wrong with those.
When did PRS kind of land on your map? When did you take notice of PRS and start getting interested? Do you recall?
Interestingly, a buddy of mine, Joe Mullins, owns a music store called Performance Music Center. And I worked there for a while, and we're just good friends. And so I went to a couple of NAMM shows. I don't know if you've ever been to a NAMM show.
I'm not.
You have to go before you die. You have to go at least once. So I went to, I don't know if it was Anaheim, or it actually may have been Atlanta, because they used to move the show around a bit. And there was a booth with a guy named Paul Reed Smith. He wasn't up on the main floor. He was on like one of the sub floors where the smaller builders are, because he really wasn't a thing at that point. But that's when I first got exposed to his guitars. And then years later, I didn't own one at that point, but years later, there was a dealer up here that had, that carried the line, and I went in and always loved the birds on the neck, I just thought cool. That's cool. And that started me on my PRS addiction, if you will. But yeah, so
I won't ask anymore on the PRS. I said I won't ask how many you've had in your possession at any one time. Well, that's
okay,
off the record.
Fair enough, but it kind of ties into the Rickenbacker, what I was talking about with the 12 string.
Yeah.
I couldn't play the thing. So I actually own a PRS 12 string. You don't see many of them. It's a hollow body, with a normal size neck. So, if I feel like I need, to do some birds or some Tom Petty or something like that, and I need a 12 string, electric 12 string, I go to the PRS.
You got one. Good. By the way, the Rickenbacker, did you sell it right before it needed a string change?
I think I changed the strings on it once, and I made the mistake of taking all the strings off. which is not a good idea because that tailpiece just falls off. And trying to get the thing, yeah, I probably took to Kurt at that point, and I was like, dude, here's some strings. Would you take care of this for me? I'll pay you, because yeah, that's not a good thing. But so I was saying earlier that I just never really bonded with Gretches, but I wanted something with a Bigsby-ish thing. Yeah. So I found, I think I was in reading Vintage Guitar Magazine. I know what it was. It was Nancy Wilson from Heart. I saw her playing one of these. This is a Duesenberg. And I was like, what is that? So I had, did some research, and I don't even think it's her guitar. I think it's like one of her guitar techs who owns the guitar. So, this is a little bit bigger than a Les Paul, but it's semi-hollow, and they have their own tremolo system, which is very Gretschy, or, very Bigsby-ish, but actually stays in tune very well. This is called a Starplayer, Starplayer Plus or something. And it's got a P90 in the neck and a humbucker in the bridge, and just a beautifully made guitar. And like I said, gives me kind of that, and I'm not a big, dive bomby kind of whammy guy. That was after I, really started playing the whole Eddie thing. But I'm sort of a more of a David Gilmour-ish, just a little wangle, as opposed to a big one. But yeah, this is a very, very cool guitar. They make a bunch of different models, and this was just kind of the one that spoke to me. And again, the color, I got 2 orange guitars. I never realized that. But yeah, Duesenberg, very, very interesting. Cool stuff. So
it having a humbucker and a P90, does that kind of hit the check boxes for you? Does that one deliver it all?
Yeah, pretty much. And there's a setting on the pickup selector that allows you to have, the 2 pickups in series, I believe. So it isn't quite, like the middle position on a Les Paul where you got 2 humbuckers. You get a little bit of that clarity from the P90 in the front, but a little bit of power from the humbucker in the back. So it's kind of a best of both worlds, if you will.
That sounds like a good tone. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that when I got that Junior, the 59 Junior, that sort of started me down that P90 path. So I own a bunch, and the other one I'll show you is a Hammer. So, Hammer's basically gone at this point. They closed the plant in Connecticut. It started in Chicago or Illinois. And this is, I think, a 2007, and I think they ceased operations not long after this. But it's called a Talladega. Cool top, I like flame, but 2 P90s in here, and a 4-way switch. Yeah, so you can do series and parallel. But very cool, very, very well made. And Joel Danzig is still making guitars under his own name, after Hammer closed. But again, P90s kind of can't go wrong with them. This is chambered too, so it's not super heavy.
Cool.
I could not wear my Les Paul, my 9.5 pound Les Paul anymore. Those days are long over for my back.
That's got a really nice kind of, it's got a really nice telly blend into a Les Paul almost with that shape.
Yeah.
And it works. That's counterintuitive. Like, no, don't do that. But that looks really good. Yeah.
Yeah, like a Tele and a Les Paul had a baby, right?
Yeah. And a good looking child at that.
Yes, yes, a well-made child. So, yeah, so that those are some of the more interesting ones that are in my collection, and some have stories, and some are just cool. And my guitar tree here, I kind of rotate, so I'll leave something on there for a few weeks, and I'm like, I haven't seen the fill in the blank in a while, and so that one goes back in the case, and the other one comes out, and gets a string change, and away we go. So
yeah, does your string change day keep you pretty busy all day? You try to space it
well,
all
if I try to do them all, yes. But I'm actually pretty quick now. Not quite like Joe Bonamassa's roadie or something, but I've been playing for so long. I've changed so many sets of strings that I can do it pretty quick. And now with locking tuners, we didn't have locking tuners back in the day, so you had to really wrap the strings. But now with locking tuners, man, you can do it very quickly. And I do like locking tuners. I think it's a great invention. So most of my guitars, even if they didn't have them originally, they have them now.
Okay, nice. Well, what about the one that got away, or the ones that got away? What, any heartbreaking moments?
Well, I think just from a nostalgic standpoint, that first Tele that I had, that 72 Tele,
Yeah.
I kind of figured that sort of falls into that got away camp. I could buy one, right? But it wouldn't be that one.
Right.
So I kind of feel like that one sort of got away. The Gibson Marauder, I couldn't give away, so that I do not miss that one at all. And the ones that I had leading up to kind of where I'm at now, just steps in the journey,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I'm kind of at a place where I have enough guitars. I'm trying to thin the herd a bit, just because can only play one at a time. I haven't figured out how to play multiple ones, but other than that, I would say there really isn't anyone that I feel like, I wish I still had that one, or I feel like I'm at the place where I've got the ones I want.
Yeah. So no bucket. Well, there's got to be a bucket list guitar. Do you have one?
And it kind of goes back to that. I love the look of those modernistic guitars, like a 65 Firebird or something like that. I just don't find them comfortable to play. So I can't justify buying one to just hang it on the wall and look at it. Sure. I've tried it, and it's just not my thing. It's fine for other people. But if I could get, a 58 Flying V, an original one, and it didn't cost me $300,000, sure. But, that's that's not in my future. If you will. But, I will say, sort of on the amp side of things, and I know you're a Guitar Gavel, but you got to play through something, right?
Right.
So if there was one amp that I wish I hadn't sold, it was my 72 Marshall 100-watt head. I played that all through college and after college. And thankfully at that point, Tom Schultz from Boston had invented the Power Soak. So you ever seen the Power Soak?
If I have, I'm not recalling it at this moment.
It's basically an attenuator, right? Okay. But there really weren't attenuators back then. So it was this little box with a bunch of holes in the top because the thing, you could fry an egg on it. Because it basically, took crank a Marshall. I mean, you would be deaf in minutes. So this basically brought it down to a level where you could actually play it in a club and not kill people. So I had my 100-watt Marshall with my power soak, and we're doing BTO and Styx and Jay Giles band and that kind of stuff at a reasonable volume. And thankfully things have sort of moved away from that now. These days, people like small amps, which make way more sense to me than where are you going to play a 100-watt Marshall these days,
Right.
Yeah. So for a while there, I acquired a bunch of blackface Fender amps, 65s. And I just got to the point where I was like, you know what? I got too many amps. So I went onto eBay to see what they were going for. This was during sort of the midpoint of the pandemic.
Okay.
People were being stupid. I mean, they were paying what I call stupid money for that kind of stuff. And I was like, okay, time to get some stupid money. So I sold off.
Right. I'll take
sold
that.
off a bunch of stuff and made at least doubled what I paid for those things. And they're still going for a lot of money. But again, can only play through one guitar and one amp at a time.
That's right, man. Rob, I don't want to close us out if there's a guitar at your feet that we haven't talked about, but have we run through everything you want for show and tell today?
Yeah. I mentioned the PRS 12 string.
Yeah.
Which are, it's not like it's rare, but you don't see them. I have one. I have it right here.
All right, well, let's do it.
Let's open that up. In a beautiful charcoal finish, hollow body, semi-hollow, with, intonatable 12 string. So, unlike the Rickenbacker where each set of strings was on one saddle, this has 12 saddles. So you can actually dial the intonation in very nicely. You can see, I think Alex Lifeson from Rush played one of these for a while. But just a beautiful guitar, and I love that finish.
With all the silver. Yeah, it's just,
yeah, I do like the flame, and like I said, a normal neck, so I can actually play it. So I think that's what I would close with.
Cool, man. Well, look, Rob, this has been a ton of fun. Thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Anytime I can talk guitars, you can't shut me up. So,
well, hey, we'll continue this offline, but it may be that we need to do a part 2 and you rotate out the guitars on the tree and we see what's coming up next.
Okay. Yeah, that works.
Cool. Well, hang on one second. I'll close this out. Thanks everybody for spending your time with us. Thanks again to Rob for your time and showing off your great guitars and hearing your guitar story and your journey and how it started and how it's led you to where you are today. So everybody, thanks so much for checking out the Guitar Gavel podcast again. If you like what you saw or heard, please leave us a rating. We'd really appreciate it. A good rating at that. Thanks so much, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for tuning in to the Guitar Gavel podcast, and a special thanks to Steve Kuykendall for composing this music and being such the great guy and friend that you are. As a reminder, hit the subscribe button and sign up for our twice weekly newsletter at guitargavel.com.